Now, let me introduce our next speaker, who's Majd from the Dubai Supreme Council of Energy, who would like to discuss how the keynote on net zero, and we can't wait to hear about it because I think this is a discussion now of everyone. Welcome on stage.
A big round of applause, please, for Majd.
Good morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be part of this event today, and I can feel the energy, honestly. It's really nice to have like games in between, so thank you for joining us in this morning. So today I'll be speaking about net zero in the hospitality sector. I'll tell you more about what Dubai is doing as well in terms of net zero and how this influences the hospitality sector, as well as key measures that you can take in your hotel to be net zero. But first, let me start with a story. Meet Jack. Jack is 37 years old. He loves food, as you can see, as we all do, right? Jack has been living over 30 years of his life enjoying food, enjoying his life, eating a lot of food, as we all do. One morning, Jack woke up. He was feeling tired. He was feeling off, not energized. So he went to the doctor to run some tests. And the doctor found out, based on the blood test, he has high blood pressure and most of his blood signals were off. So the doctor advised him, listen, Jack, you need to do some changes. You need to eat healthier, you need to do some exercise, and you need to change your lifestyle. So Jack started making some changes. He started working out, he cut off junk food, and started walking every day. So he started losing weight. So he started losing maybe 5 kilograms of weight. But after a couple of months, Jack still feels off, still feels not energized. He wants to feel better. So he went back to the doctor, and the doctor was, listen, Jack, you've been doing this for over 30 years. How can you expect, just by minor changes here and there, to feel better, to be energized, to be regenerated? So this is the story of Jack. I think we all know a Jack in our lives. I was a Jack 10 years ago, and unfortunately, our planet is also a Jack. But the issue here is that our planet didn't reach this point by its own. So the planet didn't just create emissions and climate change and all of this global warming. We're the reason behind it. Our actions are the reason behind it. So, and this is what we see, is that our actions has trapped these emissions in the atmosphere to create global warming and climate change. And honestly, the interesting thing that we see these days, even I spoke to many people in this summer, no one I spoke to, and they told me, everyone told me that they have witnessed a heat wave in Europe, in Lebanon, everywhere around the globe. They feel the heat waves happening. We can see also the floods happening. We can see also wildfires. All of that incidents have been increased in depth and frequency. And the interesting thing is that science is finding that there are linkage between these incidents and climate change. So there is proof now. The science is clear that the climate is changing and we're living it every day. So what's the solution? Net zero, the topic of our presentation today. So net zero by 2050, limiting global warming by 1.5 degrees Celsius. But when we talk about net zero, there's a lot of people don't know what is net zero, actually. Why 1.5 degrees? Can anyone answer that? What's the difference between net zero and carbon neutral? I know hotels like to use a lot the carbon neutral terms. We're carbon neutral, we're offsetting our emissions, we're doing this, we're doing that. But what's the difference? Why we need to achieve net zero? And this is why I have a short video for you about net zero. 1.5. 1.5 might be the most important number in human history. Why? Scientists warn that the global temperature increase beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius could lead to catastrophic climate change incidents. Last year, we surpassed that threshold. In February 2024, it has been confirmed that the 1.5 degrees Celsius has been breached for the full 12 months for the first time. But does this mean that we are too late? No. The 1.5 target is an average figure over a decade. Are we far from that? No, we are dangerously close, and the time to act is now. Net zero emissions explained. The term net zero emissions has been widely used recently in the fight against climate change. But what does this term mean? Emissions refer to greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxides, and fluorinated gases. Net zero doesn't mean zero emissions. The term net is very important because it is nearly impossible to reduce all emissions to zero. Net involves balancing the total amount of greenhouse gases emitted with an equivalent amount removed from the atmosphere. So to get to net zero, we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and balance any remainder emissions with emission removals. Why aim for net zero by 2050? Because it aligns with the global target of limiting global warming by 1.5 degrees Celsius. Net zero versus carbon neutral. As conversations around the climate grow louder, buzzwords like net zero and carbon neutral are being used to describe the steps to combat climate change. When businesses talk about carbon neutral, they often refer to accounting for carbon emissions and taking steps to offset them by investing in carbon sinks that absorb CO2. This balancing practice is known as carbon offsetting and could involve planting new trees or investing in renewable energy projects. On the other hand, achieving net zero means that the company needs to reduce its absolute emissions across its supply chain to align with the 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming. Carbon offsets are often utilized for a small remainder of the unavoidable emissions. Net zero is similar in principle to carbon neutrality, but it is expanded in scale and is essential to stay within a 1.5 degrees target. What is a carbon budget? Think of it as a financial budget, but for carbon dioxide emissions. It's the maximum amount of CO2 emissions we can emit to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Imagine a cake representing the total amount of CO2 emissions we can emit. Each slice is a carbon budget for a different sector, like industry, transportation, buildings, and others. If someone takes too much, there won't be enough left for everyone. To ensure everyone gets their share and plays their role, we need to work towards net zero emissions across all sectors. This means reducing emissions and balancing the remainder CO2 emissions we remove from the atmosphere. Carbon budgets are vital tools for climate change analysis across countries, companies, sectors, and even individuals. Have you ever thought of calculating your carbon budget? That's a good question to start with. Anyone here calculated their carbon budget? No carbon budgets? Committed to net zero, right? Do you have explored the carbon budget term? Maybe we should start thinking about it now, to see how much we can emit in the future. In all cases, we've seen that there's a global rise in net zero globally. So there's more than 140 countries that are committed to net zero. Around 77% of the global GDP is actually under a net zero pledge. The UAE is one of these countries that is committed to net zero by 2050 with a pathway, with a strategy to achieve different targets on net zero by 2030 and 2040. But despite all of these global efforts, scientists are still warning the world is not doing enough. Actually, just the last couple of weeks, we've seen more than 5 reports about the state of climate change, and all alarming. The most recent one is the state of climate change last week. And the statement is very clear. 45 indicators are not meeting targets on net zero. None of the indicators are meeting targets on net zero. So the situation is really critical, and achieving net zero would require all of us to work together. But also achieving net zero, sometimes people see it as a cost. However, for countries and companies, achieving net zero doesn't translate into economic contraction. On the contrary, achieving net zero creates job opportunities and GDP growth. So to achieve net zero, we need to look at all sectors. So starting from the power and the water sector, through solutions like solar photovoltaics, CSP, battery storage, emerging technologies like hydrogen, green hydrogen. On the transport, shifting to public transportation, improving the efficiency of vehicles, existing vehicles through maintenance is also part of that equation. Shifting to electric vehicles is also part of it. So all sectors need to achieve net zero. And we're talking here about buildings as well, including hotels. So we need to focus on several aspects for hotels, for example, on net zero buildings, retrofitting existing facilities, on cooling specifically here in the region is extremely important to achieving net zero, as well as embodied carbon for new buildings. But the good news here is that these measures exist, are technologically proven, and economically feasible. If you can see here, the blue bars represent the economically feasible measures. So solutions exist, they are proven, and they can provide immediate reductions in emissions. We were talking before about energy efficiency, and this is where energy efficiency comes into place. Why focus on tourism? Yeah, why don't we focus on other sectors? You might say shipping. Why don't you focus on other intensive sectors? Because tourism accounts for around 8% of the global emissions. Just to put it in context, the whole Middle East, the MENA region, contributes to around 5%. So the tourism industry in emissions is much bigger than Middle East. 75% of these emissions come from transportation. The remainder, 25%, come from buildings, from hotels. 1% of the global emissions come from hotels, which is, you might say, well, it's just 1%, but this is 1% of the global emissions. It's gigantic, and we need to address that. When we talk about emissions from buildings, there are usually two things we need to talk about. We need to talk about operational emissions, and this is when we talk about operations of facilities, including heating, cooling, HVAC, power, and equipment, and also embodied emissions. I've just mentioned them before, but these emissions are very much connected to the building materials and construction processes. Imagine a building block that has been processed, manufactured, the extraction of raw materials, the transportation, all of that costs energy, consumes energy, and contributes to emissions. So before you step into the building and operate the building, there's a huge part of emissions that's stuck in the building blocks. So that's what we call embodied emissions, and these are 11% of the global energy-related emissions. But to achieve net zero, as I mentioned before, we need to decarbonize all sectors, and this is where decarbonization of buildings come into place. So how do we decarbonize buildings? We need to focus on two things, as I mentioned. We need to focus on new buildings and on existing buildings. New buildings being net zero, aggressively on energy efficiency and renewable energy, and existing buildings, retrofitting them. And when we talk about retrofitting, we need to have globally 2.5% of the global building stock needs to be retrofitted. Currently, we are at 1%. And currently, most of our retrofits are shallow retrofits, 5, 10%, 15%, even 20% of energy reduction. But we need to go far beyond that. We need to reduce our emissions, reduce our energy by 30 to 50% to align with net zero targets. So having solar panels on your roof to offset your emissions isn't enough. You need to, at first, start with reducing your energy. And some might say, okay, I've done it. I've retrofitted my building this year. We reduced 10%, 15%, mission accomplished. Well, no, retrofitting is it's not just one-time process. You need to do it. You need to keep on looking on your energy consumption, finding ways on how to reduce it. So this is why we need to really stress and really address energy in buildings and evaluate it not only once, but periodically. What Dubai is doing. So Dubai has a strong strategic and policy framework on resource efficiency. We have the demand-side management program, which has been there for over 13 years, and it addresses different aspects of the whole built environment. We look at buildings and infrastructure, equipment, devices, processes, water resources, efficient vehicles, and many aspects of the built environment. But for hotels specifically, there are different areas that would influence hotels. So the first program is Net Zero Ready Buildings, and that program focuses on new buildings, through building regulation and compliance. So for example, next year, there's going to be an update of the building code to improve energy efficiency level by 35%. By 2030, another update of the building code with 45% energy reduction. So this code would set definitely requirements for all buildings, new buildings, as well as including hotels. A second program is building retrofits. So looking at building retrofits is extremely important. Dubai has put also a concerted focus on building retrofits. And the retrofit program here, we have seen major retrofits, including major hotels retrofitting their buildings and going beyond the 20%. We've seen government buildings going to 35% energy reduction, which is great to see. But in Dubai, we created what we call an ESCO model, where we have accreditation for ESCO companies. We have accredited energy auditors, which you can approach for your hotel to assess where your hotel stands in terms of energy and water performance. Cooling is a major load. 80% of the electricity consumption at some months in hotels or in other properties come from cooling. So efficient cooling is a key strategic area for us in Dubai, and this is where we promote the use of efficient cooling, water-cooled chillers, as well as district cooling. A fun fact here, that Dubai has the largest district cooling network globally. So if your property would be able to connect to district cooling for new properties, this is a quick win for you, because that's where you get efficiency on cooling. Distributed energy, for sure, through Shams Dubai program and installing solar panels on the roof or beside the building. How do you start your net zero journey? I know many of you are quite advanced in your net zero journey, especially with bigger chains, but also smaller chains and smaller hotels don't have resources and really don't know where to start. And where to start is actually start from the basics. Net zero isn't complex. Net zero is, what is my energy consumption? If we're talking net zero energy, how can I reduce my energy consumption? And implement the measures, and then recalculate, calculate, and then evaluate, and maybe continue on improving. So start with gathering data. Energy, water, guest night is extremely important. So it's extremely important to ask if I'm at 70% efficiency, occupancy, or 80% occupancy, or 90% occupancy. Does this translate on my energy consumption or no? Because that's a big question, you know. Efficiency is also about how efficiently you're operating your hotel. So guest nights is extremely important. And this also is translated in terms of KPIs. So for engineers here, definitely they've seen these KPIs, kilowatt hours per meter squared, the physical, let's say, efficiency of the building, but also looking at operational efficiency, kilowatt hour per guest night, and checking if I have higher guest nights, would that impact my energy consumption, lower guest nights as well? So all of that is extremely important. And the third thing, which is I believe many hotels here, which are part of the bigger chains, are doing, is benchmarking. You need to understand how you're performing against your peers. So against your hotels within the same chain, maybe assigning or checking which hotels in the same chain look similar, operate in the same way. So this is where you create your kind of benchmarking group. And you can also benchmark against industry benchmarks. And here are industry benchmarks by Emerson Building Council. For example, hotels in Dubai on average consume around 240 kilowatt hours per meter squared. Resorts on the 340 kilowatt hour per meter squared. So this is where you start comparing yourself against your peers, against your hotels, but also against industry benchmark, and see where are you on the scale. A good place to start is 30% lower than the average. So if I'm consuming around 170 kilowatt hours per meter squared as a hotel, I'm talking not as resorts, that's a good place to start to lowering your energy consumption. I think time is up, but I will take extra 2 minutes. Yeah? Cool. So what can we do? And here is the process where you need to be looking at from an energy perspective. So people usually directly start by on-site renewables. Let me install solar panels. That will cut my energy consumption. However, you need to start there. So starting with the building management, how you're managing your building. Energy conservation. So how you're managing your building, how efficient, if you have lower occupancy, are you grouping hotel rooms together or not? Are you turning off one floor or not? These are the questions you need to start asking, even if you have the same existing systems. How I'm operating these systems. Second is passive measures. So looking at the structure of the building, the envelope of the building. So we look at insulation here, at the windows. Air tightness is extremely important as well. Then active measures. Here where you go into looking at cooling, heating, hot water production, hot water for pools, all of that you consider here in the active measures. And then you do renewables. So there's a huge step before renewables. So you have a lot to do before going to renewables. And for sure, the grid is decarbonizing. In Dubai, we have 100% clean energy target by 2050. So the grid is decarbonizing, you're reducing your emissions, all meeting hand in hand to achieving net zero. But I think I want to use this opportunity to say my last message. I spoke a lot about net zero from energy perspective, but also net zero and sustainability come hand in hand. You know, you can't go do only net zero energy without doing sustainability. So, and here I would like to say that hotels have resources in comparison to other building typologies, in comparison to residential sector, where you have multiple residents, you have an owner, a facility manager, maybe also have this complexity with hotels, but in hotels, when we speak to hotels, we see that they're quite advanced compared to the other sectors. And I think this puts a bit of let's say, expectation on the hospitality sector to go beyond their actual operations. So reducing your energy is important, reducing scope 1, scope 2 is important, but also looking beyond that. And also, I believe I see hotels as like testing labs. You can test different technologies. We've seen it with waste management testing on waste and couple technologies. So they are as like testing labs, but they also are education hubs. Imagine the influence of the hotel going beyond the property to the guests and how much you're influencing guests, not only influencing guests in the hotel room, but also influencing them in their life. Going beyond that to the community. And I think this is important here in the region. We usually see hotels like isolated from their community. So how to engage with the community, how you engage with the city around you. This is extremely important. I've seen examples in Dubai Marina, for example, a hotel collecting plastic from nearby residents and doing plastic art of it. So that's brilliant because you're engaging and you're educating the community as well. And this also includes your suppliers and the supply chain. That's it from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Majd, for first explaining the difference between carbon neutral and net zero, and as well, what's our role as hotels, and what can we do to achieve a net zero. Now, I would like to welcome again Radhika on stage to tell us mainly how we can make the most of the summit.
Before Radhika gets on stage, we would like to thank Majd, for his time. All right, and there's a small little gift that we would like to give, okay, to you, Majd. All right, so this is special. So if you see this, we partner or, we work with I'm Inclusive team, and they have made special. So there is this girl, Gul Khatun Musawi. She is an Emirati diamond painting expert. She used her creative expression through diamond art, and this is her product. So these are coasters, which is handmade by her, and this is something that we would like to give it to you.
Thank you so much.
You came down the stage very quickly. I was going to come up there.
Should I go up there?
Yes, Radhika, could you be, please? Yes, please. So that's something really...
The team from I Am Inclusive was supposed to be here today, but unfortunately they couldn't join us.
Yes.
So they are team from POD, and they would love to be involved more with hospitality and how can we do. And this is an amazing gift that they sent because they couldn't be.
Yes.
And this ties in very nicely with what Majd said about communities and hotels.